Welcome back, Sleepyheads, and thanks for tuning in to another episode of Sleepy Aliens Perspective. I'm your host, H. Lee, and it has been a minute since I've been on camera. I think it's been like over a year, maybe. Um, but today I just want to follow up on some of the chaotic, there's so many rumors surrounding Virginia Giuffre's death right now because this is going to be one of those classic stories and the history on this planet where we don't get real answers for things, where there's cover up and there's people who are probably, I'm going to say this about our family, there's probably information that they can't share because they could be fearing for their own lives as well. And like I said in my previous episode, I am not buying the narrative of what they're saying about how Virginia passed away. And yes, she had a lot of trauma and we don't even know the depths of what she experienced while she was with Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. We can never really attest to that. But what I can say for sure is that she seemed like she was ready to go through the fight. And I think she would have did that for her children and other survivors. I think the only way she could convert that energy of shame that she felt for luring other victims into Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell's trafficking ring was to stand up for other people and be a leader in that sense. And I think she really prided herself on that. And I think she really wanted her children to be proud of her for that. So I'm never really going to completely buy this narrative of her self-deleting. But I just want to go over one of the only other narratives that the media is really covering because, I've seen different podcasts and different YouTube channels bringing different people on, and they're really going into depth about different theories and backgrounds. But I want to focus on what the media is saying because the narrative of the media, I believe, is setting up a patsy for this crime. And while this patsy may be a valid perpetrator in this, if this were to be a crime and not a self-deletion, I think it's just important to touch on. So Virginia Giuffre's husband, Robert Giuffre, it came out that basically he had been abusive to her for over the past 10 years of their marriage. And I believe in January they separated. And then in February, he filed a restraining order against Virginia and he had custody of their children. He was living in Perth, Australia, which is about a 59-minute drive away from near Gabby, Australia. And that is where Virginia was living, was on their family farm. I say it like it's casual, but it was like $1 million family farm. But I'm just looking at my notes here really quick. So in 2019, Virginia tweeted, "I am making it publicly known that in no way, shape, or form am I," can't say the word, self-deletion. You can kind of fill it in from there and guess what I'm trying to say. So that was what she posted in 2019. She continued by saying, I have made this known to my therapist and GP. If something happens to me for the sake of my family, do not let this go away and help me to protect them. Too many evil people want to see me quieted. So again, that was in 2019. So Virginia felt the urge to express that, which makes me think to some degree she was being harassed, stalked. There could have been witchcraft that was being placed around her. And I know people don't want to believe that, don't want to think about that, but black magic is a real weapon that elite people use, that non-elite people use in our society. People who don't have that awareness of it or who want to act like, they have this magical shield that will protect them from those things. I think it's very unfortunate. And in a way, it's almost good not to think about it because a lack of self-awareness kind of does make something a little less powerful if you don't bring that into your psyche and your reality. But at the same time, for somebody like Virginia, who was exposed to a lot of evil and dark things and very dark people, black magic, the use of it could be a very real factor in her reality. So, and I also want to say too, powerful people in this world, they don't just retain power through elections and, starting corporations. Power is retained through money, social connections, black magic, crime, and blackmail, essentially. That is how people maintain power, in my perspective. And hey, if I'm wrong about that, or if you disagree, you can let me know. But I feel very safe saying that. So during the time of the incident, it had come to light that Virginia's husband was abusive. And the fact that Virginia's husband was the one who filed the restraining order against her, he said that she was also violent and that he feared for the safety of the children, which is why he got custody of the children. So this is all happening before she got into that bus accident that the police said was a minor accident in which people had only minor injuries. And if you've seen that photo of Virginia in the hospital, she looks like she was severely beaten. And from the way the story was saying, she had a caretaker because Virginia was in such poor health. She was having a lot of organ issues, and people say that when she went into the hospital, the accident exasperated her liver and kidney issues that she was having. So had this caretaker. The caretaker was the one who was actually driving the car when the bus hit it. The bus driver gets out. I've seen a report that said there was no kids in the bus. I've seen another one that said there were kids in the bus. But the bus driver, thinking that it was just a minor collision, he walks away. He was like, okay, I'm going to report this. He goes to the police station. He files a report. Allegedly, Virginia goes home, and then she starts to feel worse, and then she goes to the hospital. So that is how this was all reported, and I find it to be very sketchy, very confusing. But when Virginia makes it to the hospital, she shows up with all of these facial wounds and bruising and this swelling. And if someone were to be hit by a bus, and for someone to rule this accident as minor and to not see, I mean, bruises wouldn't show up that easily, but if her face were damaged in that way, for her to show up to the hospital like that just a few hours later, you would think that someone might think, well, hey, this maybe wasn't a minor accident. So that's just something to keep in mind. But the fact that she wasn't driving, I think, is interesting. And, I don't want to shed any negative light on the caretaker, but from the report that I read, the caretaker said she was in deep mourning and she looked at Virginia like she was her own daughter. And I also want to say, too, that Virginia's brothers and I believe her sister-in-law corroborate the domestic violence claims against her husband. And they said that, yes, it had been going on for years. And apparently in January, the separation was caused by an incident where Virginia was beaten to the point where she could have died. And her sister-in-law said that had they not separated, that she absolutely would have died. So the media narrative now is focusing very much so on the alternative theory that it could have been her husband. And like I said, it's a 59-minute drive from Perth to near Gabby, Australia, where Virginia was living. So if you think about it, something could have happened. Allegedly her husband could have driven down there, for whatever issue they had going on in the moment. He could have beat her, attacked her, and then the caretaker, when it was safe, could have taken her to the hospital. So that's just something to think about. And men in domestic violence or custody disputes, they often will take control over the children and hold that against the mother to create more emotional abuse, because they know that, the bond of a mother and a child, and having that control to where the mother can't have that control, it does a lot to a person psychologically. So in a way, from my perspective, it does seem like that could have been the case as well, because I couldn't find any reports of where it explained how and why Virginia was violent to the point where, her husband would get approved to have this restraining order out against her. I couldn't find anything that explained that. So I thought that was really interesting. But something I thought about too, that when it comes to Virginia's story, and I think what comes in mind with a lot of abuse stories and just the cycle of spiritual lessons that people have to go through. So, spiritually, let's say you have an addiction, a problem, a bad habit, a bad emotional cycle that you find yourself repeating in your life. You cannot break that cycle until you heal and learn from it. And when you do that, when you change and you heal all of that internally and spiritually, you can then attract something better into your reality. So I think about the interview that Virginia did with the Miami Herald, and she talked about how she was working at Mar-a-Lago in Florida when she met Ghislaine Maxwell and told her that she was studying massage therapy and that she was really interested in that. And Ghislaine's like, yeah, well, I know someone who will definitely help you get you started in your career. And Virginia talked about how she had opened up to Ghislaine that she had come from a lot of abuse, and I believe she was sexually abused as a child. And so she divulged that information to Ghislaine, but despite her even divulging that information, I think spiritually she was already been brought into another cycle of the same traumatic pattern, and she was again abused and traumatized. And so when Virginia said that she finally left Jeffrey, he had sent her to Thailand to go pick up a little girl, because at this point, Virginia had become one of those victims who get turned into a perpetrator. And there's a lot of Stockholm syndrome in that. There's a lot of manipulation, the victim mentality of feeling very hopeless and you can't escape. So it's not necessarily a person who truly wants to, commit these crimes and perpetuate a whole trafficking scheme and ring. So Virginia said she went to Thailand and she ends up meeting Robert Guiffre there. And the two fell in love, and she says that she called Jeffrey and she told him that she wasn't going to be coming back and she was not going to bring him the little girl that she was supposed to bring back. When I first heard about that story, in my head naturally, because yes, she had enough bravery to say, Jeffrey, I'm leaving you. I'm not going to come back. That's one thing. But for her to escape into the arms of another man that she ends up marrying a week after meeting him, that to me, it just sounded like someone else who was going to be abusive as well, because she hadn't truly healed from the trauma of her abuse, and she hadn't, rewired her mental schema to be someone who, was in a place where they were secure in themselves, loved themselves, could take care of themselves and be on their own. Like, if Virginia's story was like, I went to Thailand with Jeffrey and I ended up escaping and I worked in some random, like, shop, or I worked on a farm for like a year and a half and then I met my husband, that would make me feel better about the fact that she randomly met this man and escaped one abuser to end up in the hands of another abuser. So I just thought about that, and I think people have to be mindful whenever they are going through these cyclical traumatic experiences in their lives, that a lot of times we think that we're leaving one thing, but we find ourselves dealing with the same problem, but just at a different level. Like, yeah, maybe we've, come to terms with some aspects of the trauma and healed a couple aspects, but God, the universe is like, hey, you're still not quite where I want you to be with it. So you're going to have to go through this again. And the next time you come out, I hope that, you're stronger and that you can truly stand on your own two feet and your sense of self is re-established and your spiritual backbone is fully intact. And I think that's something that we can take away from Virginia's story, another aspect of her story, but just something to think about. Because I've had my own cycles in life where I completely thought I had overcome a certain issue or cycle, but I just found myself in another level of that. And each time you go through one of those cycles and you're in a different level of it, the purpose is to look back at how you would respond previously and, you know, respond in a different way, respond in a more enlightened way to what you have learned from your past. And I'm talking about your emotional responses, not only what you say to people verbally to stand up for yourself and establish boundaries, but I think that's a huge aspect of it as well. I just wanted to mention that too. But yeah, so for Virginia to become separated from her husband in January, for that restraining order to happen in early February, for the bus crash to happen mid-February, and then a few weeks later for her to have self-deleted. And people are saying that it was painkillers that she overdosed on. Like, even that information is not completely clear. And again, it was so funny. I recently attended this symposium and there was a person on there talking about misinformation on social media. And I had asked the question, like, the only reason that there's misinformation is because there's a suppression of information. And when people withhold that, people will build their own theories, they will do their own investigations. But if people, didn't covet that information, didn't suppress it, society would operate a lot differently. But we also have to keep in mind that institutions and various bodies of power and cabals and factions, they know that knowledge, that information is the greatest form of currency and power. And I would put that over money, right? Because you can blackmail somebody having a certain amount of information, and that blackmail can give you money and power. But the ultimate weapon in that situation is the information itself, right? So that's just something else to think about there. But all of this leads up to the whole few months of the year was just this buildup of moments. And I fear that they could flip this all on her husband and that he will be seen as the main perpetrator in this situation. And that's what the case is pointing to. And that's what the media is talking about more. I mean, because there's no way to prove if she was being harassed by, any elite individuals, whether that be like British royals, um, people within Jeffrey's network, other people who were afraid to have her speak out, or if somebody else was in the process of suing Ghislaine Maxwell and Virginia was going to have to go to court to testify for that individual or something. There's a lot that we don't know that could have been happening behind the scenes because, like I said in my last video, Virginia was the only survivor of Jeffrey Epstein that was truly, so forefront in the public and speaking out. But there was several other women that not only did Virginia have contact with I said women, I mean survivors, victims that she had contact with who were also a part of those lawsuits. So Virginia may have had to speak up for them, testify for them, verify that this individual was abusing, harming this victim during this day, this time. We don't know. So there could have been future elite people that were being implicated in previous crimes that Virginia had been a witness to. So the reasons to silence this woman are endless. And I will again say that to silence Virginia could snuff so much hope out of survivors and victims of not only Jeffrey and Ghislaine Maxwell, but other big name elite people that, stories that aren't truly public yet, and like I said before, if you read any like MK Ultra survivor books, SRA survivor books, and you hear about their perpetrators and how they operated those crimes, how they operated the abuse, the psychological torture, the constant sense of they were never truly safe, these women being on the run, these women not being able to trust the police, a therapist, like, it is so disturbing. And I tell you, if you read Kathy O'Brien's book, that was the first one I read, Transformation America. Like that one, I had to read it in small chunks because it's so disturbing. From the moment that she was groomed and programmed to be this sex slave for elite individuals, not only in America, but all over this planet. Oh man, the things that they do to a child and the amount of people that are working around this one asset. I mean, we'll just call her that, and ensuring that she stays on this path to be controlled and used throughout her adulthood. And one day, randomly, they'll decide to get rid of her when they have no more use for her. And thank goodness that didn't happen, because if Kathy O'Brien had not spoken out about her story, had she not written that book, had she not gone through the very difficult process to regain all of her memories and to be as high functioning as she is now, like, there is so much that we would not know. And really, Kathy O'Brien is very much a trailblazer, like Virginia Giuffre. She opened a pathway for other survivors to tell their stories. And um, man, and I think Kathy O'Brien, I still haven't watched it yet, but I know she went on the Roseanne Barr YouTube channel and she did an interview with her. It's crazy, Roseanne, getting into all these like deep conspiracy conversations too, I think. But yeah, I just wanted to talk about that because that's a scary thing when you are victimized by someone with an elite social societal status. They can control, they could pay off anybody to be watching you, clocking your every move, whether it's like your neighbor, or your employer or your gynecologist. That's how terrifying it is. And you truly don't know who you can trust or who you should go to, and I don't know. The setup, I'm getting used to it, but that's the scary part. And so for Virginia to make it that far in her survival story to where, she is testifying and where she receives a settlement from the British royal family, I mean, that is huge. That is unheard of. That is the first time I've ever heard of that happening, because there's been so many other stories where they just get rid of those people and you never hear of them again. But Virginia made it so, so far. And I still, again, I hope that this doesn't deter other survivors from speaking out. And for me, I'm so crazy about life. Like, I've been through so much. And at this point, I'm like, you know what? If I have to go out, standing up for myself, speaking up for what I know is right, sharing my testimony, I would rather go out that way than any other way. and I feel like Virginia had that same spirit. So again, I'm never going to buy that she unalived herself. I don't think that's accurate. And again, Virginia had a lot of enemies, a lot of enemies. And what's crazy too, when I think it was that Saturday was the 26th. I woke up around 8:30 a.m. I was scrolling on my phone in bed, and that's when I saw the headline. And when I recorded that session, that video, the last one that I posted, I was genuinely like sad. I was genuinely devastated, very heavy-hearted, and like it took my breath away. And the only thing I could do to make me feel better about it was just to express my feelings in a video and just express my thoughts and talk about it. And I hadn't really spoken about Jeffrey Epstein on this channel before. Well, I think I did briefly, but I hadn't talked about Virginia's story or anything else, but it was definitely something that I followed because, you know, around that time, that's when I was becoming aware of the elite ST and SRA and MK Ultra. I tell you, that time between like 2018 to 2022 was just like the year of my reality just getting just fucked up completely. I was trying not to curse, but there's no better way to say it. I mean, there was a point where, like, I've said this before, I couldn't watch movies, I couldn't listen to music the same. I still can't watch a movie or listen to music without wondering what kind of person this individual is. And I know people always say, well, focus on the art and not the person, but the art comes from the spirit. And if the spirit is rotten, I don't want anything to do with it. But it's a twisted world we live in. And I actually I let myself go in TikToks like one night a week where I'm on there for like 4 to 5 hours straight, which if you use TikTok, that's very easy to do. But I came across this video of this SRA survivor, this young model. What is her name? Mustard Seed. It's Mustard Seed something. I have it written down. Hold on one sec. Okay. Okay. I think it's Mustard Seed Hannah. But yeah, I came across her video and she talked a lot about her SRA experiences. I want to try to put them together in a compilation. I just don't know if that will make it through YouTube and all of their checks and balances. But I also came across another woman. She claims to be Shia LaBeouf's twin sister, and she claims that she and Shia grew up in a SRA like cult like family, and their birth certificates were altered and they were separated at a very young age. But she was ritualistically sold and pimped out to different elite individuals. And what's really crazy about her story, I just finished rewatching Curb Your Enthusiasm. My mom watched that show. She watched Seinfeld growing up, so naturally I ended up watching Seinfeld. And I remember she watched Curb Your Enthusiasm. I always liked Larry David. And literally just a day before I came across her video, I was just telling a friend that I hoped Larry David, like, was a nice guy in real life, that he wasn't a creep or anything. And what does this girl who claims to be Shia LaBeouf's twin sister say? That Larry David was one of her perpetrators. And she has very vivid memories of him and Jeffrey Epstein. And I try to believe these people. I really do, because there is a level of psychotic where, yes, somebody could go on a social media platform and make all of that up, but to what purpose? You're going to have your channel, you're blocked, you're going to be blocked and suppressed in the algorithm. Like, People are going to constantly call you crazy, denial. You can't get famous from this stuff. You really can't. You're just going to deal with a lot of skeptical people. And then, a small population of people that truly believe you and stand for you. And she has no physical evidence to prove that, Larry David was her perpetrator other than, her word and her testimony. But I just thought it was weird right after, I had that moment with a friend and I was like, man, I hope Larry David's a good person. I hope I don't have to add him to my list. And literally the next day, I'm scrolling on TikTok and that's the video that I come across. And I got to this point right after that time where I was like, okay, I stopped watching TV and movies. And then I just kind of had like a dark period. And so I kind of needed that comfort and that outlet of TV and movies. So I kind of broke that. And then I kept telling myself, well, this is safe to watch. Well, this is okay. That was kind of like my consolation through it all. But I'm almost thinking that I need to have another one of those periods where I try to give up on TV. And that's really hard to do when you're someone who does not, yeah, I don't do a lot of bad things in life. So, I have a few addictions. It's like TV, sugar. Um, yeah, so that's just one of them. But I have that moment a lot where I'm like, okay, I need to give it up and just read. But, when you work a regular 9 to 5 office job, I'm not a drinker, but I will watch, a couple of hours of TV when I get home and it like relaxes me and calms me down, makes me laugh, gives me a sense of escapism, that I need. But yeah. So, sleepyheads, I will follow up with any new reports that come out about Virginia. I'm sure this will be one of those, cases where every year it's something new and the media just uses it as a money grab, you know clickbait, and they find some new person, individual, some piece of evidence, and I think it'll just be perpetuated in time like that. And we may never truly know the exact truth, but at the end of the day we know what and why things went down the way they went down. But sleepyheads, thank you for tuning in. I will be back with an update if I get another one on this story. Yeah, we'll see. But I'll see you next time, guys. Have a good night, sleepyheads. I'm like trying to